Welcome back to the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. We have an awesome show for you. This is our review section. The new Porsche 911, including the GTS hybrid version, a Mazda Miata, and the Lamborghini Urus. For good measure, we drove the Mercedes-Benz EQE SUV. That's their, I think, pretty attractive new electric crossover. So that's a review section. With that, I'll bring in our road test editor, Zach Palmer. What's up, dude?
Oh, just coming off a long weekend of watching Goodwood here. It's been a very busy few days in car news, and I guess driving a lot of high horsepower cars here. Looks like a pretty loaded review section.
I think so. We've had a lot of fun driving these. We're going to have a lot of fun talking about them. It's a nice segue to our news segment. We're going to talk about Goodwood, some of the cool cars we saw coming out of there, and also a couple of crashes. There's some spy shots out of Hyundai as we take a look at the new Palisade, what form it might take, and some news out of Audi as well. So with that, let's just get right into it. You went to, I believe it was Spain, right, to drive the new 911. That is a enormously significant car for Porsche and for enthusiasts everywhere. I'll toss the coin. Should we start with the hybrid or the base air quotes car first? What do you think?
We should definitely start with a hybrid. That's the one that I think everyone wants to know about, right?
I think so. Tell me about it.
Yeah, man, the 911 T-Hybrid, first hybrid 911 in production. Porsche actually made sure that they specified that at the launcher, because they have done like a race car concept with the hybrid before, for some fun 911 trivia there. But no, this is a hybrid that you wouldn't even really know it's a hybrid from behind the wheel, honestly, unless somebody told you. Which, as far as like upsetting the boat for the Porsche faithful, it's probably a pretty safe way to go about hybridizing the 911. Obviously, when a lot of sports car companies hybridize cars, you get a lot more performance. And this does have more performance, but honestly, one of the big reasons why Porsche did this was because of emissions as well. European regulations have, they're getting stricter and stricter, and Porsche's like, all right, how can we, keep getting more and more powerful and cleaner? Well, let's add a hybrid that is like unbelievably cool with all of its technology. My favorite part of it, which is really, really neat, is its new electric turbo. Which is a very unique turbocharger, even more, interesting than Mercedes electric turbos that they've been doing. So the way it operates is it uses power from the little lithium-ion battery pack, which is actually positioned where the old 12-volt battery pack was, right in the front. And it uses that to spool up the turbo on its own. So basically, it acts and behaves like a naturally aspirated car, because as soon as you step into the throttle, you're on boost essentially, which is sort of that holy grail that OEMs and everyone has been going for with all of these smaller turbocharged engines for a while, is to make them feel like naturally aspirated engines. I think that Porsche's attempt at that is without a doubt like one of like the best that I've ever tried. And of course, in addition to, you having boost straight away, there is an electric motor integrated into that PDK that can add some power of its own and sort of fill in. Now, it doesn't just fill in at the low end, it fills in at the high end, mid-range, everywhere. And ultimately, what that ends up netting you is a Porsche that almost feels like it has like a big block V8 in the back of it. Which is an odd thing to say, honestly, but like the torque feel and just the sheer creaminess and wide range power that this thing has, it doesn't necessarily feel like the 3-liter twin turbo flat sixes that we've been having in 911s for a while, and even obviously all of the naturally aspirated ones that we had before. Those were a lot more peaky. These, if you hit peak torque right above 2,000 RPM, and you're rocketing away. One of the best ways that I could describe that early torque was, being somewhat surprised the first time that I really got on it out of a corner, and feeling, that rear end step out way quicker and earlier than it has for any other 992s out there. So, you got to watch out for that, which is great. Having all of that performance down low makes the car a lot more usable and workable everywhere. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty safe and good strategy for hybridizing the 911. It's faster than the previous one without the hybrid. I had it on track at Ascari there as well. The performance is wild. Porsche says 0 to 60 just under 3. Per usual with Porsche, it feels quicker than that. And yeah, it's interesting. The last thing that I will touch on here is that, when you think hybrid, you also think, oh, it's going to be efficient. Oh, this is not any more efficient than the other like non-hybrid 911s. That's because, it's all about performance and getting emissions to where they want it to be. You're not necessarily going to get better fuel economy with a T-Hybrid versus other 911s, which is odd to think about, but yeah, that's just the strategy in which Porsche took for it.
It's interesting because European companies will look sometimes at, sort of green cars a little bit differently than American car companies. European companies will look at reducing emissions versus just raw fuel economy. And that's what we're seeing here with the 911 hybrid. And I think that's a very interesting approach. I think it allows, this car to, it sounds like from what you're saying, have tremendous driving dynamics. It's not more fuel efficient or much more, it sounds like, than the outgoing GTS, but it is more powerful. You wrote in your story just how much more usable power you're going to get too than the older car, which I think is very cool. This reminds me a bit of how Mercedes, Lexus, a few other sort of luxury brands, right when hybrid tech was, moving over to the performance and luxury sectors, they were like, yeah, fuel economy is great. We're trying to do a little bit better. But the play is almost a little bit like Formula One, where they try to give you that extra boost to the powertrain. It's another tool. So I think that's a very natural way for Porsche to integrate it. They've been talking about electric 911s, hybrid 911s for years. I remember interviewing an executive at the Geneva Motor Show early part of the last decade. And I remember it was a very close, like, quarters. The scrum was around. People were, asking him all sorts of questions in different languages. It had just been a press conference where they used to do these like headphone things where you hear it in whatever language is yours. And I feel like I remember whoever the PR guy at the time came up to me and was trying to clarify that, like, hey, we're not doing a 911 hybrid tomorrow, because this is like 2012 or something. I think the PR guy was Bernd Harling, if I remember right. Old Porsche PR guy from back in the day. But I digress. What was this thing like on the track?
It feels like a normal 911 on the track.
That's a good thing.
Which is, that's sort of the theme of this thing. Honestly, like, Porsche can like throw any old customer that like had a 992 or 991 before it, and if you don't tell them it's a hybrid, like, all right, it's just a Porsche 911. But no, it feels like that. I mean, even down to the brakes, so most hybrids and plug-in hybrids have regenerative brakes, because that is how you feed energy back into the battery. This car doesn't. Funnily enough, so like the two ways that this car funnels energy back into its battery is via the engine. So while you're braking, or if you're coasting, it will literally raise the load point of the engine, so burn gasoline to feed power back into that battery, or it will use the e-turbo, which it does not have a wastegate, but it automatically regulates itself and turns itself into a generator when it's not needed to actually pump more air back into the engine and act like a turbocharger. And that all, feeds power back into the battery, and then you can deploy that power via the electric motor or by keeping that turbo spooled up so you're ready and waiting for that next corner to take off again. And it feels like a big naturally aspirated engine. It doesn't feel, so the actual weight thing was a huge thing for Porsche. That's why the system sort of is the way it is. Honestly, it only adds 103 pounds versus the previous gen GTS. So it's still super lightweight. It's not this big heavy beast on the track. There's been a lot of talk about like the new BMW M5 plug-in hybrid, how it's over 5,000 pounds. That's not this. This, for all intents and purposes, just feels like a regular 911 that is stinking fast, and you really don't notice any of the electric trickery happening out there. Like, you don't feel it on the road, you don't feel it on the track. It just all goes and works seamlessly in the background, which honestly is probably the way to do it for a 911. You're not going to upset anyone, and there's simply more performance. So yeah, it absolutely rips around a track. I had a lot of fun at Ascari. It's a really, really cool racetrack too. You're sort of there in the Spanish Andalusian mountains. Beautiful olive trees, groves all over the place. It has a sort of Laguna Seca feel to it as you're going through the hills and mountains everywhere. Just a really, really pretty paradise out there in the middle of nowhere. And a great spot to go ripping around in the new 911.
All right. Well, you talk about like it feels like a regular 911. You also drove the regular 911, the Carrera. Bit of a different sort of animal than the hybrid. Perhaps a little more familiar, a little more comforting for some. Although it definitely sounds like Porsche tried to make the hybrid version as palatable as possible for even the purists. But this is a little less expensive. It's definitely the basic model. How was it?
The base 911, and I mean the first base 911 that I drove was the previous generation 911 Carrera, and there's nothing really base feeling about like the base 911. I feel these days. Also, they start at nearly $120,000 now, which is a bizarre figure for folks that have been tracking 911 prices for a while. I remember when I was growing up and going to configure them, they'd be like in the 90s or so that you could get a base 911, but no, now we're into the 120 plus. No, so the base Carrera gets the GTS turbochargers. It gets some extra bits from the Big T turbo as well. That makes it a little more powerful than before. You don't really feel that extra power too much, honestly. I think it would take like a back-to-back drive to feel the extra 9 ponies that it has. No, it is a lovely, sort of back to basics feeling versus the GTS. The ones that I drove were both all-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive, and this Carrera was just, it felt like just the car. It did feel lighter than the GTS, you obviously notice it doesn't have all of the fancy suspension bits such as the rear axle steering, and the wider track width, larger tires, larger brakes that the GTS has. And I got to drive the Carrera alongside the GTS on track, and it was a chore trying to keep up to the GTSs in that base Carrera. You see the benefit of all the extra power when you are trying to chase them down on track. Honestly, so like looking at the Carrera is a good opportunity, I think, just to mention some of the interior changes as well that could rock the boat with the purists, and that one of them is they switched from a twist key on the left side to a push button on the left side, which obviously the Taycan was the first of the Porsches to do that. Then the Cayenne switched to it, but it feels a little bigger when the 911 goes away from a twist key into a button. I think most folks will get over it. I know I was definitely a little sad not to be able to twist a key anymore in that thing. And then the other one is they went to a fully digital cluster instead of having an analog tack and 2 screens flanking it. I sort of get why they do that, because With those two screens flanking it, you had to basically peer around the steering wheel rim to see those at all. Now, at the same time, I think that anyone who likes Porsches likes a good analog tack, and I know that I missed it as well there. But you get all these new customizable views, map, navigation, a really cool sort of 12 o'clock red line with a central tachometer in there. So just small stuff like that, that change the experience, not vastly so. I don't think it's kind of like, oh no, people won't buy the 911 because of this new digital age. But there are, it's these small evolutions in the 911 that, it always seems to upset folks, when you go from air cooled to water cooled, and then you go from naturally aspirated to turbocharged engines, and you start adding more things like they have like active stabilization programs with the sway bars. You have rear axle steering, just all these things that sort of take you away from just the most simple basic thing of driving. But no, I mean this car is still a 10 out of 10 in my book. So much fun on both road and track. So yeah, I'm excited for the rest of the variants to get revealed now in the 992.2 range, because these are the only two, and there's no manual yet. We're going to have to wait. Hopefully the Carrera S and Carrera T offer a manual, and then of course whenever the GT3 comes out as well, they'll bring the manual back. But for 2025, it's automatic only. So hope you want a automatic 911 if you're trying to order one today.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting approach. But hey, I mean, I think this overall, this new portfolio of 911s is going to go over pretty well.
Same. Absolutely. I mean, they of course they keep increasing the price, but I think for most 911 buyers, it's probably not going to be too much of a deterrent, honestly.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Well, any other final 911 thoughts before we move on?
Final 911 thoughts. I think that they killed the hybrid. I think that they did a really, really good job with that, honestly. Most of the folks that I talked to at the event as well were really enjoying it. And, it's just, in general, like the event itself was really well run by Porsche, and that like they had so many experts and engineers there to explain everything to us, because it is such a complex system. It's just really appreciated to get that big download from them and, see the way that they're thinking, understand it. And I came away very, very impressed with how they executed it, because I think that it had potential to cause a lot of consternation. And I think that when everyone else on staff and when everyone in the general public, actually drive the thing, I think they're going to really like it too.
All right, that sounds good. Well, let's transition over to a also very engaging sports car at a much different price point. This is the Mazda Miata. I think it's always a highlight of summer when we get to have this come through the fleet. It's been really, well done, Road Test Editor. It's been a tremendous summer of sports cars and other exotics for the Autoblog fleet. I would put this one up with the 718 we had earlier in the summer, as far as just engagement, top-down fun. One of I think the most ideal summer cars in that sense. It's been a minute since I've driven a Miata, so I think it really it resonated even more deeply with me than perhaps it has when it felt like we used to just get more Miatas, maybe. I don't know. But, it was plenty of fun. I went and picked up a pizza with it and did some other driving, one evening last week, I guess it was. It was even actually raining. And I think just to show you how much fun a Miata is, you put the top down and you still drive, unless it's like buffeting with you. It almost had that, almost that Le Mans kind of feel with the rain, the wipers going across. So I had a great time with it. You drove it as well, right?
Yes, I did drive the Miata, and I guess maybe the reason why there haven't been as many Miatas is because it's sort of been the same thing for a while.
Yeah,
but they made some significant updates for 24. It's still like the ND generation. So it's a minor refresh of sorts. It gets Mazda's latest infotainment system, which was like really, really necessary because it was still running Mazda's infotainment from what felt like a decade plus ago at this point. So that was a huge upgrade, I feel, because that was honestly, I think, one of the big stopping points for probably a lot of folks to buy the thing. But no, now it has Mazda's latest and best there. It has a new limited slip diff that is supposed to be better than before, and it has a new track stability control mode. So obviously we didn't drive it on the track, so feeling out those extra performance upgrades that are more of a track thing are it's tough to do on the road itself. But I think there's all these things that if you want to daily drive it, autocross it, track it, like you're gonna find upgrades for you with this refreshed Miata. I know that they're calling it the ND3. We've had ND1, ND2, and ND3. So it's cool to see that Mazda is still iterating on this thing, and like you said, like man, it is just a joy every single second that you're driving it. You really cannot beat the feel of it being so low down, the low sills, wind in your hair. It's a special feeling in the Miata, and it's all very affordable too.
It's tricky. I think if money were no option, I think I would still go with the 718. That car deeply hit with me. But the Miata makes it close. And then when you look at the price difference, as far as, the right or left brain or however you're making your decisions, Miata's never a wrong decision. It looks like you're wearing a Miata shirt right now. So
I am actually. It's the Autoblog Blip Shift Miata shirt.
There you go. There you go. It's a good shirt. I had that on last week. I think the day I drove the car, it seemed like the thing to do. So, just the gear shift is outstanding. It's such a connected feeling. And I think it looks good. I don't know. I dare say this is the best looking Miata. Design is so subjective, but I think they really style this, the ND generation up to the point that it's competitive with really anything at the segment at almost any price point. It's classic design, tapered. It's got more attitude than I think it used to, but it's not too much. I don't know. I would consider, if I were going to buy a Miata, I would look at the RF one, maybe even if there's a used one. I like that. I was actually at the reveal of that in New York a few years ago. It was probably like 8 or 9, I think, with Eddie Sabatini, our video producer, head of video. And we were both like, this is the car right here. So I think from a pure design aesthetic, with those kind of like buttresses going down the back for the seat pillar, I might want that. And then it's just a little bit of I don't know, like a 3 Seasons car at that point too, because you take the roof panel off, even if it's cold out, you turn up the heat, you're okay. But yeah, Miata's always a good time. It's always a good time.
Yeah, the RF was actually the first Miata that I ever drove.
Wow,
I drove it. Yeah, I drove it. I still remember it because it was like 100 degrees outside. And I was like, wow, thank goodness I have this hardtop because I can put this up and protect myself from the sun and run the air conditioning. And it, but then when it got night outside, it's like, all right, it's like 80 now. Let me roll this top down electronically and have this great time with this really, really sweet looking design. I'm 100% with you there. Like if I'm going based on looks, the RF is the one for me because it is such a sweet and really unique looking convertible design, I think, especially for its price point.
All right. Well, I guess we're going to go from something, pretty awesome to something else that's pretty, very interesting. This is the Lamborghini Urus. This is the first time I have driven the Lamborghini SUV. It's been out for quite some time. I remember just how significant and even controversial it was that Lambo was going to do an SUV. I thought it was even at the time more controversial for Lamborghini than it was Ferrari, because Ferrari always is kind of, dabbling. They had the FF, you might recall. Um, but for Lambo to go down this road, it really was a departure. Arguably, it makes more sense even for Lamborghini to do this because they could draw on the Volkswagen Group's vast network of resources to make this, to make it an SUV. This has the biturbo V8, which that to me was the first thing I noticed. It's a Lamborghini without a V10. I thought that was different. And having driven the Sterrato, the Huracan Sterrato with its V10 just a couple weeks earlier, it's different to be in a Lambo that's, dare I say, a little more on the refined side. This has a different set of competitors than perhaps some of the rest of the Lambo lineup. I like the design. They definitely were aggressive, but it's interesting because ours was kind of like a grayish green color, and it didn't stand out nearly as much. Like I had literally had somebody like knocking on my door asking me about the Sterrato. The Urus was just, I think, I don't know. I think from a distance, somebody might even think it's a Lexus, still a lot of fun to drive. I tend to think if you're going to buy an expensive SUV like this, you do get that sort of status. It's a status symbol without a doubt. But I also somewhat argue you might be better off spending your money somewhere else because you can get an awesome SUV, a luxury SUV for half this price with a big engine in it if you'd like. And if you still want to do the Lambo thing, well, maybe just do that. Don't bother to, go down the SUV road. I don't know. Am I wrong? What do you think?
No, not at all. One thing that I am curious about that you'll have to touch on is this versus like an Aston DBX. I've not driven the DBX, and I'm very curious to hear what you think about the two sort of compared to each other. But no, this car, I've driven a Huracan as well, and this does not feel anything like a Lamborghini Huracan, I guess, so to speak. It's even tough to like see that lineage between like, all right, this is the supercar and this is the SUV. There's the logo there. There's a few interior things like the flip up start stop, Lamborghini stuff in the cluster. But honestly, like my big takeaway from the car, and don't necessarily read this as a bad thing, is that it feels a bit like an Audi RS Q8 that's been finished by Lamborghini. There's so much Audi in there, from the steering wheel to the infotainment system, to the switches, buttons, to the feel of the engine, the sound. So much of it does, feel like that Volkswagen group, everything about it. Now, if Lamborghini had made an SUV that was more like a Huracan with a screaming V10, very little sound deadening, substandard-ish tech, and questionable visibility and all that, would that make it a bad SUV? It very well might. It would make it a cool Lamborghini, but honestly, like for the sort of buyer who's going to be buying an SUV and wants to daily drive it, like because the Urus shares so much with that Volkswagen group and whatnot, I think that it's arguably a better just general daily driver because of that. And you can sort of like see Lamborghini straddling that line there where it's like, all right, like we want this to be like a usable SUV. We still want it to be sort of Lamborghini-esque. And you can tell like it is more extreme, than say like an RS Q8 or any Porsche Cayenne that I've driven, because it's also built on this platform. The engine has, a little bit more zing to it, feels a bit spicier in the handling realm. And just overall, they've turned everything up a notch to where, it feels like it's finished by a Lamborghini to that extreme, like supercar extent. But no, you just have to sort of go into it, like realizing, it's a Lamborghini, but, XYZ things, you have to understand that, it's still a very daily drivable car. But yeah, no, back to that Aston thought, I guess I am curious about that.
Yeah. So just on a pure overall execution, I like the DBX more than I like the Urus. I thought it felt more like the powerful yet refined ethos of an Aston Martin. I thought they got the styling a little bit closer. I think the Urus gets a little cartoonish, which I do like. I think if you're Lambo and you're going to do an SUV, you kind of got to really dial it up. You got to put all the angles and creases. But I like the Aston Martin a bit better. I thought it felt like more of a genetically an Aston than this feels like. This feels definitely like a Volkswagen Group product to me. Again, not a bad thing. For my money, if it were me, I would get a Cayenne off of this platform. I did
Same.
like the Urus better than the Bentayga, though. I thought that was more of like a Franken sort of SUV, where like, I mean, you want to talk about crazy styling, look at the Bentayga. But no, I just preferred the Aston DBX. I think it really, from the powertrain to the interior, which is just absolutely gorgeous, to the way, and I think that was part of it too, was the design cues on the DBX felt like Aston Martin very purposefully tried to express itself, cheesy as that sounds, as well as that just very high quality interior. Whereas the Urus felt more like, okay, guys, we got to do this SUV. Let's make it as good as we can. And it sort of went to Lamborghini finishing school, which is sort of how you've been hinting around. But I mean, it's in this day and age, you have to do it. You absolutely have to have something in the segment. We've heard rumors that McLaren is going to go down this road. I struggle to think who isn't there yet at this point, or likely going to be there very soon. So, we'll see. I think it'll be interesting if, and I'm highly speculating here, if Lambo were to ever try to look at a smaller SUV, something that fits in that, more like that compact mid-sized tweener spot. I mean, if you're looking to sell some volume, that's a spot to do it, right? Going through the backlog, looking at the history, this was shown in Pebble Beach in Beijing back about 12 years ago in concept form. And it's interesting, if you Google far enough in the Wikipedia section, Jalopnik and Autoblog at the time thought that Urus was going to be on the sedan, which became known as the S-Tokay, which they did not build, which in my opinion, I wrote about the S-Tokay back at that time. It was, I believe genetically, it was also like a Bentley. That's something I think they should have really looked at doing. I thought the S-Tokay was a beautiful concept. And that's where I almost felt like Lamborghini succeeded, how Aston succeeded with the DBX. It felt more like a true Lamborghini. Not that I drove it, but I did see it.
Yeah, and Lambo has a history of making low slung sort of sedans, some sort of a passenger car as well. I don't know if it would sell. They'd have to go sort of the Ferrari route and be like, hey, this is our GT car. But it sure would be sweet. And I'm not sure if they would ever actually dig into that smaller, sort of like a Macan territory. It almost
they
feels
have
like
the platform, right?
that is the thing. They do. They really do. Maybe if they did, it would be electric, and it would have to be very, very expensive. I mean, this Urus, so the one that we tested started right around 220, stickered for 310 after everything. So I don't know. They could have room for something starting around 150, I bet, and then going from there. It's still, I think that's still high class enough for a Lamborghini product to be there. And I guess I should also mention that this Urus that we were testing is the S version, which is the refresh. Has the Performante engine, a few little design tweaks, interior tech items as well. I never actually drove the pre-refresh, but the power is fantastic. If this is how quick the Performante is, it is a rocking SUV as well. And I sort of like, it has the Performante engine, but the air suspension, so it's very comfortable when you're driving it everywhere. It's similar to a Cayenne or any of the Q8 RS Q8 products as well, and that it's very drivable. Like I could see someone driving this to the doctor's office every day as their daily driver. So Yeah, a lot of duality there and some meaningful updates as well, I think, for the S.
I was meeting Associate Editor Byron Hurt to swap cars, and I got in the Miata, and it was a rainstorm. And just mentally, I was like getting up, and when you're driving an interesting car, maybe you're excited. There's also just for me a little bit of nerves. I mean, I've driven a lot of cars, but I also think that's generally a good thing. Keeps you
Yeah.
sharp, and it means that like you have a pulse. This is important. You should be. If you're not excited to drive a Lamborghini, well, what are you doing here, right? But I got in there and I was like, after like a mile, and I had driven it the prior night as well. I was like, okay, I'm just kind of in a Volkswagen Group SUV. I wasn't like, it was 100% different than driving, an Aventador or an Huracan or something like that. You're driving a crossover, and it's immediately when you get in there and yes, you flip up the ignition switch. That's super cool. But the fact that you could use the infotainment system, you're in a different kind of Lamborghini when it's like, oh, hey, I can change the radio pretty easily here.
Everything's working as it should. What's going on?
Yeah, no, but very cool. I think it'd be intriguing to try the SE. That's the plug-in hybrid. You want to really sort of recalibrate your brain. Lamborghini plug-in hybrid, that's something different. So maybe we'll get a chance to try that. Speaking of things you would plug in, though, let's move along to the EQE hybrid. EQE. This is an all-electric Mercedes. I spent like a night in it. You spent a little more time in it. I generally liked it. I really do. I like how Mercedes has their design could be a bit polarizing, but I generally really like the interiors, not only of the electric cars, but also of their ICE cars as well. But what's your take on this thing?
Yeah, it's it has a lot of interesting features, I think, and one of them just really stands out driving it is it has, Mercedes full 10 degrees of rear axle steering, which, sort of makes the thing turn on a dime to the point where you almost have to like recalibrate your brain and your hands. Like, okay, don't turn in so hard at this. You're sort of expecting this like nice, slow Mercedes relaxed steering, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, here we go. But no, it's really cool, and I think that would make it a really nice city car in that way. The one that we had was the 350 Plus, which is a single motor rear wheel drive. It's not quick, it's not slow. It's sort of right there in the median range, where I think most folks, if you're hopping out of like, say, like a GLE 350 or even a GLE 450, one of their mid-range SUVs, non-AMG, you're going to be plenty happy with the torque, the get up from it, and range is pretty solid as well. Right around 300 miles. Charging, slightly less so. I charged it once, maxed out, right under 170 kilowatt charge speed, which is quite middling especially for a pretty expensive luxury SUV these days. But no, I really like being inside the thing. The only thing that I would like a little more of are buttons, I suppose. It's Mercedes. The one that we had was not the hyperscreen one, but it is one large screen right in the center with very few buttons to do anything with. There's a little more tapping through menus, if you want to adjust the driver assistance settings, trying to change the volume via the little slider that they have over there can be a little trying. Just, some small usability stuff that I think has gotten worse from one generation of Mercedes to another, despite obviously the screens being very impressive, quick, and, just nicer to use than previous generation. So yeah, I mean, I'm still not a fan of the design. The one that we had, the EQE SUV is probably my favorite of all, like the EQ stuff. It's probably the least potato-y looking of the bunch. I know it's probably not the way that Mercedes would like their designs to be described, but the very aero-focused design is not exactly an eye-catching pretty piece. I think that others have managed to do very aerodynamic designs and not have and I guess also give the design some real character. So yeah, I mean, I like the EQE SUV. Don't love it. I would probably go for something like a BMW iX, Audi Q8 e-tron over it. Even and I'd have to really consider the Cadillac Lyric as well. I think in this class, which is definitely a much better value than the Mercedes. So yeah, it's a tough world out there right now for these electric luxury SUVs because there's just more and more of them getting out there. So yeah, it's this one's sort of middle of the ladder for me.
I think overall, I really like the QE, and I tend to look at most Mercedes, especially like the C and the E class, ICE side of things, as being at or near the top of the segment. I tend to think they're a little bit better than BMWs and Audis right now. And we'll talk about this on a future podcast, but I just got out of the new 5 Series and really enjoyed it. I always like the 5 Series. But at the end of the day, I was like, nah, I think the E-Class is still on top of this. I still think the C-Class is still on top of that. So it's a little weird for me to look at the electric, like the EQE here, and think, middle of the pack here. I'm not as hung up on the design, I think, as a lot of people are. Like, you're definitely the majority. I kind of like it. I do think the sedans, like the EQE sedan, for example, is a little bit of a better look. I think the SUV side of like the Mercedes electrics, something's lost. It's a little blobby. It's a little like I think you said potatoey or marshmallowy. It's just not nearly as distinctive as like, the internal combustion cars. So I think that's a problem. Ironically, I would argue BMW has that problem with the 3 and the 5 Series. Like when you look at them, I feel like they've erased like the belt line and that sort of hockey stick thing that would, bookend the doors. And to me, it's like this could be a Honda Accord. And I feel like Mercedes seems to have caught a case of that with their electrics. I will say this. I veer on the that like 51% saying like maybe you're not 100% sure of the decision, but you're 51% and that's enough to make a call. I tend to think they did the right thing here because it does give them a Mercedes electric identity. And I don't love the designs, but I do like them. I think I like them a bit more than most people. And not to get too hung up on it, but it is why people buy cars, But to your point, though, like the Q8 e-tron, much more stylistic, the Lyric, and tremendous value compared to a lot of these things in the segment. I think, GM has had challenges getting the Lyric out, but I believe they're starting to get it out with critical mass. And I mean, we certainly see a lot of them around here. And that's another one in this segment that like, even with the caveat for your money, but also it's not GM's fault. They've come in a little more competitive with the pricing and it's built in, Michigan, I think. So it's like, yeah, you've got a little more room to run on that price side of things. So yeah, kind of middle of the pack for me. And this one, like you mentioned, doesn't have the hype screen. I didn't really miss it in this thing. Like the screen's still so big. I honestly think I thought it might have been the hype screen until I went back and looked at the sticker and then you mentioned it. So that's the other thing. In BMWs and Mercedes, there's a lot of screens in those cars right now, and Cadillacs. And I generally like it, but it's a lot of screens.
Yeah, no, like something like the Lyric, they have some nice big screens in there, but they also dedicate a lot of space to like really pretty switchgear that feels, really nice to use. Like it feels like a luxury product when you're hitting those buttons, flipping those toggles and whatnot. Versus the Mercedes, like they used to have beautiful switchgear that was like that, but now they've sort of removed it all, and that just sort of speaks to the whole minimalistic design outside and inside. It's just the path that they've taken, and they'll find people that like it, like probably a lot of Tesla buyers, and then they'll find people that are a little, I guess on the other side of the fence, like perhaps us right now.
It's true. All right, so let's shift gears after an epic new review section. Lots of things we've been first driving, road testing that are really, I think, a lot of fun. Check out all these stories on site. Speaking of 911s, your 911 Dakar is going to go up probably by the time this is published, correct?
It'll be live by the time this podcast is up. Yep.
All right. So we got you covered in all kinds of 911s. A Lamborghini Huracan Storado piece that I pulled together went up last week, so you can check out that. And I'm sure we have something coming up on the Urus probably after this show drops, but we'll have you covered there. Check out Zach's 911 First Drives. But to talk some news, there was a lot going on at Goodwood. Lots of cars, lots of sort of one-offs, kind of concept-y things built just for the hill climb. And then there were 2 crashes, which I think, made it a little more newsy than Goodwood would probably prefer to be. I don't think that's why they want to be, getting clicks and getting stories written about them. But first of all, let's just talk about some of the cars, and then we could get into the crashes. Bunch of things stood out to me. James Riswick has a nice story on the WRX. He was sort of embedded with Subaru, so he did a very deep dive. And this thing's just crazy. I mean, you look at all the aero. You've got the side flares, the wheels. It's a crazy looking thing. It's definitely, I'd say, top 2 or 3 as far as interesting discussion pieces from the event. What'd you think of this thing, Zach?
Yeah. So I guess my first introduction to this car was watching it fly up the hill on the Goodwood stream. And I was instantly just amazed, like, oh my God, this thing is moving way quicker than any WRX should be moving up the hill. Just because it is a very, singular focused hill climb design car. I love the all black stealthed out look. I would love to see if Subaru would like to trade our long-term WRX for this WRX. Like that would ever happen. No, it is quite the machine that, it always seems that Subaru is bringing something out to the Goodwood Hill climb, whether it be some of their rally cars. I got to ride with Oliver Solberg on the rally course probably about 5 years ago at this point, which was very cool. And now here they are yet again, building a really, really rad hill climb car, specifically for Goodwood. And, I'm sure that they'll take it to other events too and try and set some records. This is I know it was right in the mix with most of the fastest vehicles in the low 40s in the shootout as well. As I'm looking at James's story here, 670 horsepower, 680 pound-feet of torque. Hopefully, all the folks that own the most recent current generation WRX can look at this and, if they're really wild, take some inspiration for some modifications to their own, to their garage, because this is a really, really sweet setup that obviously starts life as a stock WRX.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty wild. There were a lot of cool things at Goodwood, I think. The Audi 16-cylinder was something that kind of blew my mind. That's not something you see car companies do, frankly, is build something from the 1930s and finish a design complete with 16 cylinders. So that was another one that stood out just for its uniqueness. It's a silver arrow, basically, that you could drive. I always think cars from that era are very interesting, and they have such deep stories. So that's kind of cool. So I like that one as well. The MG was pretty gnarly too. That was another one. I'll throw that out there.
I know that
give me a couple more. Yeah, what do you think? Give me a couple more.
Yeah, they were celebrating MG at this Goodwood Festival of Speed, which it makes sense. It's a British brand that has celebrating many years on this earth of existence, and they obviously still exist. They're just owned by a Chinese company at this point. And that they had the Cybersters out there, and then they also had this Cyber GTS concept that I thought was quite stunning. But no, just as far as other things at the hill climb that were impressive, I think that I have to mention the McMurtry Spearling. Yeah. Just because that thing, it comes back every year at this point, but every single time I am amazed at how fast Max Chilton is able to get that thing up the hill. Ford had some really awesome stuff. They had the Raptor T1 Plus, but I was even more entertained by the Mustang GTD. that was roaring up the hill, throwing up massive clouds of smoke, and just in general being a rowdy, crazy thing to hopefully entertain all of the Brits with some crazy American muscle. Those were some of my standouts. There were some really cool. I mean, obviously, there's always really cool old F1 cars there. They were doing a bit of a Niki Lauda celebration that I saw, so they had some of his cars and just cars that he had been involved with. It just also with that F1 connection, Max Verstappen was there. So was Sergio Perez. Yuki Tsunoda took an old Honda RA272, I think, up the hill. Just like it was like a 1960s or 1970s Honda Formula One car. So that was super rad. It was really funny as they were talking to Yuki after. He's like, "Yeah, this is like the first race car that has ever like fit me properly," because he's like 5'2" and very, very small even for an F1 driver. So it was sort of funny to see him like, "Yeah, this is the right size." Way back when had really, really small F1 cars. So yeah, just tons of cool people, tons of cool cars, and per usual, really, really great watching. I know that I had it tuned on last Friday as we were writing. So
Very cool. Very cool. Then a couple of crashes.
yeah.
West Coast editor, senior editor for all things features and reviews, James Rizwick was there, and he covered the Pastrana crash. And then, of course, the Lotus crash was kind of gnarly as well. It does speak to the fact that as much as this is a celebration of car history, the way it's set up, it's intrinsically a bit more dangerous than, say, rolling onto the 18th fairway at Pebble Beach, or I would almost compare it a little bit to like the Monterey Historics or whatever they're called these days, where like these vehicles are doing stuff. So there's always an element of danger. Glad nobody was hurt. Yeah, I mean, I kind of wonder if going forward they might look at some different regulations or guideline things. I don't know. It seems like two like this in 1 year is not insane. It's not unprecedented, but definitely got everybody's attention around the car world.
Yeah, no, I mean, that Lotus one especially speaks to just how powerful cars are getting these days, especially with electric motors. I mean, that Lotus had 2,000 horsepower. So, I mean, even for a trained professional driver, I know I would be quite intimidated stepping into the seat of that. Yeah, clearly things did not go as planned for it. So it always amazes me every single time that there is a crash, just how well those hay bales stand up to it. I don't know. I haven't actually looked into them to see if there's, some actual deeper technology behind there that they have hiding behind the pretty facade of the hay bales going all up and down the hill. But it obviously does make you wonder a little bit with all of these cars that are like quite literally going sideways and being pushed 11, 12 tenths past their limit up the hill. It's a great spectacle to watch, and yeah, clearly a little bit dangerous as well.
All right. So got some actual car newsy news. We'll transition over to Hyundai Palisade spy shots, which came out this week. And I thought the big takeaway here is it looks like they're kind of going down the road of perhaps the Santa Fe. When you look at it, the front is definitely, it appears to be more squared off. Like, who really knows, right? There's always so much camo on these. But I like the Palisade as in its current form. They tweaked it a little bit with that most recent refresh. We had a very, much loved long-termer. I was actually just referencing that for a long-term update with our Mazda CX-90, looking at some of the better large crossovers we've had. And, just looking at this, it looks like they're going to go down that more maybe boxy kind of road. We'll see. I think it's also a situation, too, where when they rolled the Santa Fe out, we all were like, what are they doing here? This looks nothing like anything else in their lineup. And perhaps this is the answer. So right or wrong, where do you land on this if this is the direction Hyundai chooses to go?
So I really like the look of the Santa Fe. I know that it's not a universal opinion for folks online just looking at internet comments, to say the least. But I don't know. I don't necessarily think that the Palisade should be, trying to copy the Santa Fe or just trying to do the same thing. I think it's kind of cool how Hyundai has a bunch of cars that all look different. It's not like the same design language all the way across the portfolio. And I think that the Palisade's design, as it stands, is a really cool thing. It's sort of regal looking. It's much more stately than something like the Kia Telluride. Something like the Telluride is a bit more rugged, and the Palisade is this more luxurious, refined vehicle. And if the Palisade goes, more towards like a off-roady-ish design, there's less differentiation amongst all of the three rows, and maybe you're leaving some folks out, that might prefer the Palisade's, cleaner and just less ruggedized design that this almost appears to be going for. So I don't know. I'm probably on the side of I like this less than what it was before.
Okay, that's an interesting way to put it. So you like the overall aesthetic of the Santa Fe, but you don't like it so much on the Palisade. To sort of summarize what the senator said.
I would love for some differentiation, I guess,
I
where
agree.
I'm standing. Yeah.
That's one of when we first saw the Santa Fe, that's one of I thought the strong selling points was that, hey, they're doing something different. Every single car doesn't look exactly the same, just in a slightly different size. But one thing you've seen with Hyundai over the years is they take risks with their styling. And, the Sonata, won Car of the Year, was a groundbreaking design, but very quickly they were able to change it. And then when people didn't quite like the more conservative appearance that it had, they went back to something even kind of, swoopier than before. So Hyundai takes risks with design, and I think we just kind of roll with it. My guess is this is going to look a little better in the sheet metal once we see it. But right now it kind of looks like a big Tahoe with I don't know, kind of a weird looking Santa Fe front end grafted onto it. And I don't know, I think the Palisade managed to look borderline premium. So it troubles me that they might lose that like lightly creased, kind of curvy aesthetic that I think really went well with the Palisade name. It was just a subtle, good-looking vehicle. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think that we're fully aligned there.
All right. 3-row SUV coming out of Hyundai. It looks like it would be a sibling of the EV9, which makes all the sense in the world. We're hearing word of this, and it could arrive next year as a 2026 model, actually even later in 2024. We're kind of speculating that this could be the final production version of the 7 concept, which was not very far along. If you look at these pictures we had of the 7 concept from a while ago, I think this is what they're going to probably end up doing because, Hyundai and Kia are separate, but they also share a lot. And it would make sense that it's Hyundai's turn to get something off of this platform in the electric space. So I think it'll be good. Perhaps, really thinking 2 chess moves ahead here. Maybe that's a reason they're changing the look of some of their ICE cars, SUVs, is to try to get their ducks in a row with the electrics. But natural move is my take here for Hyundai.
Yeah, I'm honestly a little surprised it hasn't been revealed yet. I know that when Hyundai Group did the Palisade and the Telluride, they were sort of revealed like back to back, really, really close together. It only makes sense that the EV9 has a Hyundai twin, and I suspect it'll take a lot of cues from the Ioniq 5, Ioniq 6, with their very pixel-like design, and just sort of go its own way, and probably not look anything like a Palisade. Unless the Palisade, like we were just talking, changes so much that it looks like the EV version again. But this is pretty much exactly what we should expect Hyundai to be doing. Get a 3-row SUV out there because, frankly, there's not a lot of them. It's like the EV9 or you want the Rivian R1S. And that's pretty much it at that price point. Now there's also the Mercedes EQS SUV, but it's not a big wide world out there yet for 3-row SUV choices. in the electric landscape. So yeah, hopefully we'll see it soon, and I bet that it'll go on sale soon too, since it'll probably just be the Hyundai version of the EV9.
Sounds like it will be a good thing. I really like the EV9, so I have no doubt I will probably like the Hyundai version. So we'll close things out here with the fact that I mean, in simple terms, Audi's killing coupes, which is just very weird. And then the A5 sedan, and we're going to see the A5 Avant wagon, which were revealed, are going to take this place of the A4, and then this is where it gets really confusing, and you can read Ronan Glon's story here. S5 replaces the S4. So it's a little odd, especially when you look at Audi's history and who they stand for, or what they stand for, and just how good their coupes have been. I also I think in the German luxury segment, there's still plenty of room for sedans, but car companies of all stripes are pulling back from that sort of segment. But you still see some critical mass for coupes, even though they're very much an endangered species as well. So I've always liked the S4 and the S5 and many other Audi coupes. You know, we know the R8 is gone. It's been gone. I guess that's technically a coupe, even though it's obviously something totally different. What do you make of this? I'm also I think it's very confusing for even like somewhat read-in enthusiasts. So what do you think of this?
Yeah, it really is confusing. That is a good way to put it, in that like Audi's whole naming scheme is changing. I know that this caused a lot of issues when BMW switched things up, and they're like, all right, the odd numbers are for the sedans, the even numbers are for the coupes and the convertibles. That's why we have the 3 and the 4 series. We have the 7 and the 8 series, and so on and so forth. And they're, Audi is sort of doing that, but that's not exactly what it is either, because they're doing the odd numbers are for gasoline powered vehicles, and reportedly the even numbers will be for electric. So that's certainly a bit odd, but hey, that's why the new Audi A5 sedan is a gasoline powered vehicle. There's not an electric version of it. Audi did reveal the A5 Avant alongside it. That's not coming to America. That will be a European only thing, the wagon at least. And I wouldn't really expect that to change, because the old A4 Avant was only sold in in Europe as well. And while we had the A4 Allroad, we never had like the RS4 Avant and the performance versions of those wagons. So yeah, that's the new naming scheme, and also no more coupes or verts. So if you want like an A5 convertible or an S5 coupe, now's the time to go do it, because they will be no more after this, starting as of the 2025 model year. The cars themselves, I think they look really great. I think it's another really solid looking Audi design. All around, and when it does come here, I think it'll be cool, because it's still a sportback, which frankly to me is preferable over something like an A4 sedan. I like the hatchback; it's more utilitarian. I think it looks better too. So I'm not super mad about the fact that like the A4 sedan with a gasoline engine might be MIA. But I mean, that it sounds like it'll come back in electric form if Audi does in fact stick with this new name change, where evens are electric and odds are gasoline powered. So have fun learning that, I suppose.
Way to break it down, though. That's definitely clearer than I led off with it. So that's a good way to break it down.
It'll probably take us all a good year or two plus to
10.
figure it out. But as Audi launches more and more into this new naming scheme, but that's where we're going.
All right. I do like this A5 Avant, though. To your point, I think it's unlikely we get that here, but that looks pretty good. Sign me up for that. That would be a lot of fun.
Oh yes, I agree. I guess we get the big wagon RS6 Avant, which actually, with this new naming scheme, it will no longer be the RS6 Avant. It'll be the RS7 Avant when the new one comes around, presuming that America gets it again, like we did before, because odd numbers are gasoline powered. So yeah, just some more fun things to think about.
All right. Sounds good. Well, we've had a very full show. We have no spend my money this week, but if you'd like to have us spend your money, we would love to do so. This podcast at Autoblog.com. What's going on in your life? Do you have a drink or, I don't know, cooking recommendation? We'll close things out with that.
Yeah, so I've been buying a lot of Oberon recently, but I did get this new shorts lager. Actually, it's a Mexican lager. It was really good. It had sort of like a tinge of lime to it. It's shorts beer, so it's a Michigan beer. They're always doing fun experimental stuff, and so I got a little 6-pack of that for last weekend, and I can definitely recommend it.
That sounds quite good. Yeah, I think I'm gonna grill some probably barbecued chicken thighs, or I might make coconut chicken thighs. We'll see.
Nice. I'm gonna be grilling the same. I got some bratwurst from the local market here, a few different kinds, and I the no yeah is would go perfect with that as well. So little grill action coming up.
Sounds good. Well, that's all the time we have this week. Enjoy the Autoblog podcast. We hope you do. Please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get the show. Again, we'd like to spend your money. That's podcast@autoblog.com. Send them to us. Be safe out there, and we'll see you next week.